It's the penultimate episode of X-Men 97. But why am I kinda disappointed?
The following is a world-class Bullshitters exclusive.
Friends, it's time for our weekly X-Men 97 review here on the channel. For the past 8 weeks or so, we've come to you each and every week with a review of this cartoon that has been solid to good to damn fun. And I've had people come out of the woodwork each and every week, professional colleagues, personal friends, fans, listeners, that kind of stuff, telling me that they were wrong about X-Men. They were wrong about this show. It wasn't this woke utopia. It may have production issues. They may not like the voices or the animation, but that's kind of where it's always ended. No one's ever called me to say, "You're crazy, man. This was an allegory for that." No, X-Men 97 has been one of those shows that's kind of suffered for wrong reasons. And a lot of people think I'm going to bat for Disney or some stupid crap like that, and that's not the case. This just so happens to be a show that I've enjoyed for the last 8 weeks. But that being said, if this show is going in a direction that I think it's going in, I will not watch the second season whatsoever. So this week's show picks up where last one ends because, previously on X-Men, and we watched the Professor and Magneto try to pick up their lives and get ready for the next offense in their war, their battle. So Professor X is at the mansion. We're watching the X-Men clean up the mansion and prepare for battle. Now this episode does something cool that we haven't seen, I guess technically named, but we see Blue Team and Gold Team. They're finally named. Now in the original cartoon, we'd seen the X-Men team up. Storm would take this team, Cyclops would take that team. That's nothing new. But I don't remember them saying Gold Team, Blue Team. And if you're a 90s kid like me, that was kind of cool. I had this book. It wasn't a comic book per se. It was from Marvel, and it was like a comic book, but it was just pages that would tell you. It was like stat book, I think is what it was called. And they had these big pictures of Gold Team and Blue Team, and I kind of just like burned those into my mind as a kid because I liked the cartoon, and anything that was kind of like the cartoon was good enough for me. So we've kind of come full circle. I now just like X-Men as a whole, and so it was kind of cool to see that. Blue Team is tasked to go find Magneto, and Gold Team is going to fight the Sentinels, aka Mastermind, aka not Boulevard Trask, David Bowie. What is his name? Bastion. That's not a joke. This isn't a gimmick. This isn't me trying to be funny. I can't remember his goddamn name because I can't remember him. Now, forgive me if I don't recall every element of X-Men comics for 30 years. I don't really remember much of Bastion, and I don't think much about Bastion. That might be a problem because this episode kind of shifts the focus back to Magneto versus the X-Men to set up status quo. This show was in a weird window where status quo hadn't been achieved, and now we're trying to work backwards to achieve status quo to move this show to give it more life, and I'm not on board with that. It was cool to see the X-Men try to rebuild their lives, and they have to go to Mirror Island to go and get old gear and old accessories and old costumes and stuff. And even though it has a story element that some people are going to like, I didn't like the fact that they went back and reverted to their classic look. Well, classic is subjective here because we're so far removed from the 90s Jim Lee look as far as we were removed from the original first appearance of the X-Men back then. So you can't really call the original X-Men series or the 70s and 80s classic and the 90s stuff modern because it's so far in the past. So what we're doing is we're taking the X-Men back to a 70s aesthetic, an 80s aesthetic, a 60s aesthetic, if you will. And for some people it works, and for other people like me, I'm not really feeling it. Now I'm going to admit that the nostalgia of this show doesn't color my reviews at all, but the design of it pulls me into the world and makes me feel a certain way. And as they keep moving further and further from the designs that are selling me on this show, I'm losing the emotional connection and the vested interest in the story. I'm just being completely honest. I'm not going to act like every element of X-Men is perfect and I like it. I do pick and choose what I read, going backwards. I don't read every issue of every X-Men story arc. They're not all great. No comic book is full of all winners. Now you might say Sandman or Invincible or something with a smaller print run, but when you're talking like X-Men or Spider-Man where you're almost into the 1,000 issues, come on now, they can't all be winners. Bad Santa should have taught you better. Now before the X-Men can go off into the battle, Magneto appears, and he brings Asteroid M to them. And he gives them this ultimatum that the X-Men can come join them, that the offer will be on the table. And Rogue and Sunspot join him, and they go off to Asteroid M. So the Blue Team goes off to Asteroid M to fight, or convince Magneto of whatever, and the Gold Team goes off to fight the Sentinels. So Blue Team has the best story where they have to fight Magneto. Gold Team, They're much more of a strike team. It's not as interesting to watch. Yes, you get some cool visuals. You see the X-Men fly around in the old Blackbird as they fight armies and swarms of Sentinels through the air. That is cool. That is fun. But the real main event, the real meat, the emotional meat that you all care about is the Magneto fight. The Magneto fight is exactly what you want. It's classic X-Men. It's Magneto and Professor X and the X-Men trying to talk through their problems before they fight. And Professor X realizes that it's too late. There's no more time for talking. Same with Magneto. And a battle ensues. We see Sunspot and Jubilee fight each other. We see Rogue and the other X-Men fight. We see Wolverine get involved. It's pretty much what you'd want. My only complaint is this is something I would have wanted a little earlier in the show because it's setting up for a second season, which I understand, but it makes you have to watch a second season of a show. I do think seasons of television series should be able to stand on their own and then connect together, especially when they're on streaming. This isn't weekly episodic television. This isn't to be sold into syndication. This is a new world we live in, a digital age where TV shows are produced differently. So I would prefer that X-Men follow that just a little closer. So the highlight of the battle on Asteroid M comes when Professor X is able to remove Magneto's helmet and they have a battle telepathically. And then all of a sudden Magneto's able to regain control. He puts the Magneto helmet on Professor X, ties him up in metal, and then all of a sudden he gets stabbed through the back by Wolverine, which is really cool. We see Wolverine the Killer. We see Wolverine and the brown costume with the blood and everything that you want out of Wolverine. Then Magneto throws him back, and we get the thing that I didn't want and the thing I'm dreading. We see Magneto rip the adamantium out of Wolverine's body, just like in the comic book. And this is where I'm starting to dread, because we all talk about how we are nostalgic for 90s X-Men. What most people don't talk about is that by 1995, those books had shit the bed and become Age of Apocalypse and other story arcs that I didn't like and a lot of people didn't like. X-Men readership declined through the late 90s. Just because it took place in the 1990s doesn't mean that X-Men 97 needs to go there. This is what I'm dreading, Age of Apocalypse, the animated series. I didn't like it then, I don't like it now, most audiences don't like it. They put out a big toy line recently, well, a few years ago now, and those toys did not sell. They're actually heavily featured in all of my Ollie's videos. I don't talk about them, but you can go find all of the X-Men Apocalypse, Age of Apocalypse wave, because Apocalypse wave is actually a good wave of figures, but you can find that at every store that I go to, because that version of the X-Men is not popular. Feral Wolverine, Boneclaw Wolverine, all the stuff that's coming next is my least favorite part of X-Men. I don't really like X-Men again ever after it becomes that. It becomes the versions that we all know and hate, and the characters aren't that great. They keep trying to bring in new versions and do this and do that. I'm pretty much out of this show after this last episode next week. If it's going to be Age of Apocalypse, if it's going to be all of the crap that I hated 30 years ago, there's no nostalgia to get me excited for next season. There's no nostalgia to get me excited for anything that comes next. This is it for me. They took classic X-Men to where it dies, essentially. They wrote it out and they did it the right way. I hated the costume changes. I originally recorded this review when I talked more about the costumes, but like Marvel Girl looks stupid. She's got a mini skirt, which I like, but she's also got a fucking huge headpiece, and it comes from 1960s design, and it doesn't work. I understand that these people want to be respectful to classic comics, but not everything in classic comic works. You would not put the Scarlet Witch headdress exactly 1-to-1 like you would in the modern Marvel movies. It looks stupid. It's like it's a headdress, but it looks like it's made of like cloth, and it goes over her neck and it stands out to the side. That shit doesn't look good in motion. Not just on film, in motion, because Marvel Girl looks so stupid with this big fucking mask. She's trying to look cool and do psychic stuff, and it's supposed to be a callback for nostalgia, and they wrote it into the story, but I think it looks dumb. And if a design looks stupid in motion, you take me out of the story and it kills the emotion. Design needs to further the plot of the story. It was cool to see Cable in his Marvel vs. Capcom costume, but that wasn't enough to make me want to see the 70s X-Men pop up. And they didn't even have the whole team there. They got a different version of Morph and all this other crap that nobody likes. This is where the show kind of falls apart, because they have all these toys and they don't know what to do with it. X-Men 97 might be a huge victim of not being able to stick the landing. If this week's show is any indicator of what next week is going to be, well, I'm not that pumped. This is supposed to be the point where I'm dying for the next chapter. I'm dying for the next season. I just want to get through it now. I didn't like this week's episode. It wasn't bad, it wasn't woke, it didn't feature the things that everyone dreads about X-Men. The sad part is, your average viewer will probably love this episode because it's X-Men and you get to see them fight Magneto and all the crap we want to. But I know what's next, and that's the problem. This is it. It's kind of like with Spider-Man. Oh, Jeff, we want to adapt Spider-Man 98. No, the fuck you don't. Because one, that show ends in a way that you can't ever bring it back because Spider-Man enters the real world, our world, and goes and hangs out with Stan Lee, the creator, and they swing off. No multiverse bullshit is going to write your way out of a pretty cool damn ending. And if you're going to take the X-Men approach with Spider-Man and adapt storylines, once they hit the Clone Wars, or the Clone Saga, that's where classic Spider-Man dies. What people who read the books then understand, or the people like me that go back and read the entire history of a character, not only through each and every book, but through books that are telling you what goes on in between, you know that the Clone Wars, or the Clone Saga, excuse me, is the end of the Spider-Man era, and Spider-Man is never the same classic character again. You get Ben Reilly bullshit, and then it evolves into the Mary Jane marriage falling apart, and the miscarriage before that, and then you get Miles Morales later on. Age of Apocalypse is like that for X-Men. So the nostalgia that they can sell us is only good for a season, because they're going to have to do the next thing logically and adapt what came after it. But they think that all nostalgia is created equally. They think everything that said made in 1990X is good enough to put on screen to adapt, and it's not. We're past the good stuff. If they're going to go back and adapt more classic X-Men in those 90s costumes and do all that cool stuff moving forward, I'm on board. But if I got to sit through Bone Claw Wolverine, Feral Wolverine, and all the bullshit that's coming from Age of Apocalypse, including the designs and the elements and all these Z-list characters and things that we're supposed to sit through, I am out. I can't believe it. Normally, I'm so excited to talk about this show each and every week. I love it so much. But I'm ready for it to end, and I think I'm ready to remove myself from X-Men for the time moving forward. If the show picks up next week and I'm excited for the second season, well, that's going to be a big stretch. I need to see where they're going in the second season to want to commit to do this ever again. I'm very disappointed with where the whole series is going. I know, right? For liking the show and never really rating any episode, including this one, under a 7 out of 10. And find out next week when I judge it all. So folks, join us next week for the finale of X-Men 97. We're going to do 2 more videos on this series. We're going to do one to review episode 8, and then we're going to do one that reviews all the episodes and ties it together and finally gives you the numerical score and my overview of X-Men 97 as a series. This has been a fun ride. It's been interesting to watch people's reactions to X-Men. It's been interesting to see how many people know X-Men beyond a certain point, beyond the childhood nostalgia and all of those wonderful things that we all know and love. Now it's time to prove if X-Men can stand past some of the nostalgia that we're all feeling for the early 90s as we get into the uglier elements. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, folks. The 90s had a lot of crap comic books. No matter how many pouches you want to count or feet you want to hide, that's not what I'm talking about. There were crap stories, and all your iconic characters kind of sucked for the better part of a decade. And so, thankfully, they kind of fixed the course later on down the run, but we're going to have to sit through that, and I'm really dreading it. So, folks, no more running my mouth, no more dreading anything else. I'm going to go. Thank you for watching. Folks, sign up for Wokebusters. It's available on Kickstarter for the early notifications and stuff. I'm waiting on the trailer, then it's going to go live, and then you're going to be able to see the book, and we're going to take it. I want to sell 1 million copies, so let's make that happen. That's not a joke. That's a real number. Speaking of real things, I'm taking the channel to Japan. That's not a pipe dream. That is, I bought the tickets. We're going to Star Wars Celebration. So join us live in Japan next year. But each and every month, we will have new updates and new videos to talk about the trip to Japan. And when we're about 6 months out, that will become bi-weekly or so. You don't understand how we're doing this. We're not your average YouTube channel where we're going to go stand around and look at cosplay and all this shit in Japan. No, folks. We're going to go give you the entire American experience in the modern age of what it's like to go to Japan. Culturally, entertainment-wise, all of those things, Japan will be represented. Hell, we're even going to have Coach Kendo give you some history lessons as we take you to some historical moments and locations in the country. We're putting the world in world-class bullshitters, and for everyone out there, remember, folks, the world class comes first. The bullshit is just for fun. So join us as we go to Japan and Star Wars Celebration. Join us for the success of Wokebusters. Hell, one day we might go to space. So don't ever count me out. Don't ever count out anything we can do here. We made Stealing Solo a hit, so let's do it again, and let's see what else we can do. Let's see. Well, we got many years left, so let's take over the world. But folks, thank you for watching. I'll be back next time with more. In the meantime, be smart, be safe, be cool, but always be excellent to each other.